Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Word with Father Dominic.
Father Ed here.
And we're diving into the 22nd Sunday of Ordinary Time. We have just finished the 6-week long, 5-week, in the discourse of John, talking about the Eucharist, and we're going back into the Gospel of Mark. And so we're kind of restarting the narrative that we began in this B cycle for all of us Bible nerds. Um, and what we find in our Gospel particularly is Jesus, who's challenging the scribes and the Pharisees, who are really trying to uphold the law, and Jesus is really trying to emphasize that the exterior versus the interior, and this age long religious reality that you have the righteous religious who are pure on the outside, but really Jesus is saying, okay, you could shine your shoes and wash your dishes and everything, but what's in your heart? What's going on? What's your faith within? And we see the really Jesus trying to bring us back to the core of what we believe.
Right. So if you thought that Jesus was having a disagreement with his disciples on the in Capernaum in the discussion about eating his body and drinking his blood, that was pretty mild compared to his disagreement with the Pharisees today and his accusation against them. Those guys in Capernaum were saying, well, this is difficult. How can anybody believe that, blah, blah, blah. These people are on the offensive, and they are condemning other people for not observing externally the 611 laws that the Pharisees had concluded were required for pious living. So there's a distinction between the law. Moses got the law from God, 10 commandments. That's one thing about the law. The Pharisees had another, 611 or 630 additional specific laws in the way that a pious and religious person would manifest their fidelity. So Jesus really goes after them, and he says, all right, you people are confused because you are straining the gnat and you are concerned about all these external observances religiously. All the while, you are misleading the people as to where defilement comes from. And this is what the point of evil is. Oh, look, Bello's here. This is the point of misunderstanding of evil, is that the Pharisees have concluded that evil, let me go. Quiet. The Pharisees have concluded that evil is something that comes into our lives by our failure to observe the pious traditions. Jesus is trying to convince us that evil and separating ourselves from God comes from within. It's a choice, so a motivation. So we were talking about what is your motivation for doing good, doing right, or being just? We came up with a couple of options. One, is it to avoid sin and going to hell? That's okay. That's a basic, maybe a fundamental motivation for people. Is it the hope that you're going to convince God that you are worthy of heaven? So we've had a long tradition of that in the Christian church. We call that Pelagianism. People that are trying to save themselves by the works that they're accomplishing. So I want to be a good person. I want to be perceived by others as a good person. I think there's a third option that's being suggested to us in the scriptures, and that is that we are able to do the good that we are called to do, and we are motivated to do the good that we are called to do because it's in that that we can dwell with God and God with us. So I think maintaining communion with God and therefore avoiding anything that would separate us from the love of God might be a new standard that Jesus is holding out for us and the scriptures in general. And I mean, this goes back, this is nothing new. The Pharisees, we don't know how they missed this class, but the call to do and be just in the world can only happen for those who know God, love God, and are hoping to maintain and live their life out of that relationship with God. Does any of us do it perfectly? No. That's why we have confession. That's why we have reconciliation. That's why we have a penitential act at the Holy Mass. That's why we have Holy Communion, because we all need to be realigned always to this life with God. So,
Yeah. And, I think there is a good intention and a good movement in our spiritual life when we strive to adhere to the laws and kind of uphold some of those exterior aspects of faith. Um, but it should never stop there. And if we plateau in our spiritual life in that surface level, then there's problems. So firstly, God gave us rules to follow them, and so God knows that as human beings, structure and rules are good for us. And so we see I think in a lot of people who are striving to increase in their spiritual life, that they'll put religious images all over. Their background is going to be Jesus on their phone. They'll wear the Jesus hat and everything, and so all this good stuff. Um, However, if that's not if we don't use that as a doorway to communion with God, then it's really just superficial in the sense that, oh, I have the Jesus bumper sticker, but I'm still laying on my horn and getting fumes out of my ears
right.
because we haven't done the deeper work of allowing Christ to dwell in our hearts.
Mm.
And so, yeah, and that's a lifelong journey. I think as priests, it's we have a constant reality of looking like we're holy people, and then
I mean, that's what the church expects, right?
yeah, church. I that's what I want.
Right.
But at the same time, I realize that if I'm not spending that time in prayer every day, if I'm not, being attentive to the movements of God in my day and in my life, then I could be as salty and as selfish and shallow as the rest of them.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think this notion of we can describe what a righteous and holy life looks like. And some of us, I'm sure all of us would agree, if somebody is very pious, they're very religious on the outside, and they are um, spending all their time in ministry and in worship and in prayer, we might say, well, that's great. That is a great description of a possibly religious person. But those externals in that description does not explain why they are that way. And I think for all of us, um, we need to make sure that the why of our lives is matching the external descriptions of our lives and vice versa. And that way it would be what the word we call authentic. That as we are on the outside, righteous, pious, just, kind, friendly, is matched by and is coming out of the fact that we are humble, holy, prayerful, self sacrificing, and relying upon the will of God inside. And so then the outside stuff should be a manifestation of those virtues rather than obviously having it backwards. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
All right. Well, peace. See you in church.